Hey, everybody, it's friend Adam. I'm here with another Wednesday debate. Today, we are going to be debating the question, are anti-theists pro-science? Which I hear all the time, but then I bring out some scientific evidence, and they don't like it. So it's an open question. We have two interesting debaters today. We have Brendan Weber, and we have Craig Reed. I'm getting a little feedback from somebody.
Yeah, that's my bad.
Oh, okay. So
Sorry.
just to start off next week, I am going to be debating Adam Kokish, I believe you pronounce his name. He's a big time libertarian. I believe he ran for Congress. He's done a number of debates. He's debated Sargon and libertarianism. We did the debate with Sargon that he did. Sitch and I did a live stream on a commentary live stream on. So it should be an interesting debate. He seems like an interesting guy. The question I swung for the fences with, it's without a strong central government, trigger libertarians. Without a strong central government, would America collapse? And I am taking the affirmative. Yes, America would collapse back to the Stone Age. It would be over. So I'll be presenting evidence. I'll be taking the opening argument, and he will be taking the negative. Today, Brenden is taking the affirmative position. We're going to give him 10 minutes for the opening intro. The question is, once again, are anti-theists pro-science? He's taking the affirmative position that they are. He's going to give us a 10-minute opening. Craig will attempt to steel man his argument and then rebut the argument. So, Brenden, you have the floor.
All right, I'll start off by saying thank you for having me, and yeah, just kind of get right into it. So I want to start off by kind of defining some of our terms here to kind of help the viewer and my fellow debater where I'm coming from to kind of help make the debate, I think, more fruitful, because I kind of like it to be somewhat of a discussion as well, hopefully. So the difference between atheism and being anti-theist, at least how I conceptualize it, so this is where maybe we'll get into a disagreement. But like these terms usually come with like various varieties and opinions about what exactly these words entail. So I think some would say essentially maybe they're the same thing. I don't think they're the same thing. I kind of view anti-theist as more so kind of against organized religion, and I'll kind of get into that as well. I don't have much of a problem with believing in God, let's say. In fact, I would go as far as to say forms of faith can be beneficial, but faith can mean many different things, such as, like in Eastern traditions, it's very different than Western traditions. The idea of being kind of spiritual, I guess you could say, it's kind of the popularized version today, that those that find benefit in those kind of Eastern traditions often don't follow this organized faith or, apply themselves within an organized community in that sort of religious sense, or even believe in God necessarily. It's how it makes them feel, I guess you could say, which might be an important aspect to come back to. So first, and then now I wanted to transition into what about theists and their stances, because this will kind of get into why I hold my stance, I guess you could say. So I find this kind of debate question itself kind of interesting when Adam reached out to me, because usually theists are the ones being categorized as like the anti-science ones. So it had me contemplating possible objections because I found it interesting to address in my opening statement. So I want to point out some conflicts that I really have with science. I want to clarify, like, my method of getting to knowledge, I think, is important, not perfect, because nobody's is. I think it's just part of being human that we don't have perfect method of getting to knowledge. So for one, as the modern world becomes more secular, the discussion of science versus religion is coming up more and more. Believers don't want to seem anti-science, but yet they want to argue for their faith still. So how do those that are pro-science find truth? One is the understanding that the truth they come to could very well be temporary. The typical language is they find truth through, like the scientific method, test a hypothesis, try to prove it wrong, do experiments, basically find a way to make the best conclusion possible and find the best foundations of knowledge possible. So then you have offshoots of this, and this is one I kind of like to use, or I say I like to use, is the first principles thinking, which is this method of vigorously questioning, your every assumption you think about the ideas in general, solutions to problems, and the knowledge you perceive to fully understand. I at least try to do this to prevent myself from being too dogmatic in my stances all the time. So that's why I like this method, because it directly denies that you have this accuracy of reasoning. It also denies the accuracy of analogy, which I think directly addresses a lot of religious claims that they often use. They often use analogies. So I like the idea of having a belief system that pushes you to identify your kind of current assumptions and address those. So this isn't to say this is perfect, like I said, but belief spectrums, I think, are on a spectrum. And we can try to like reason through which ones are the best in that way, but break things down into these like basic truths, unpack the solutions. From those foundations you try to set, you seek truth while remaining kind of curious about, questioning your truths. So in my mind, aligning with this idea plays a major role in being pro-science because it kind of directly aligns with the scientific method. So then what about religion? Because I think part of answering or having my stance is addressing why, like, I think I'm the pro-science one. I would even say that your religion goes against it in many ways. So I use the popular atheist Daniel Dennett. I just thought it would be the most like united because he's probably the most well-known atheist. Social systems whose participants avow a belief in a supernatural agent or agents whose approval is to be sought. So admittedly, some social identities that are not considered under the normal religious umbrella are getting close to this because, supernatural can mean a lot of things. That's a very inaccurate word. There's various definitions of that we can discuss too. It depends on how you define it. Plus the faiths that don't get caught up on the whole like God question, interestingly, seem to remain the most beneficial amongst those of spiritual faith. And when I say spiritual faith, I usually refer to such as, like Buddhism, Confucianism, and even Stoicism. Stoicism is very popular in the US right now. But this definition fits the popular faith here in the West of Christianity and Islam, referring to Daniel Dennett's definition. So now, both science and religion rely on truth claims. I think we both all would agree on that, or at least claims about the universe in some way or our reality, whatever, however you want to define it. So to be a Christian, you'd have to align with at least their foundational truth claim, at least in my mind. We can have a discussion about that too. The belief, in the resurrection of Christ. I think that's like a necessity. So the Bible even says this in Corinthians, like chapter 15. I don't have the quote. I didn't put the quote to waste of time. But religion and science are in conflict in how they get to truth. To put it simply, science looks to scripture and authority as evidence for, what is not seen. Where having faith is this like central tenet of traditional faith. It's even considered, a virtue, like having faith in something. So now in science, although I admit our cognitive limitations of just being human has us all using some form of faith a little bit. I fully admit that. Science sees the primary use of faith as problematic. And that's the interesting point I like. The use of faith for your reasoning is, I find, on a spectrum. And religions use a lot of faith, more so than the science side, I would say. So the other problem I have is, let's say you think your verification of truth is good. There's thousands of religion, even amongst Christians, there's offshoots of faith over disagreements within their faith. There's theists would say someone like me is living in the post-truth world where, well, even amongst fellow Christians, there's a lot of disagreements. So supposedly even amongst Christians themselves are living in this post-truth world. And I find it hard to ground science in that form of belief system. So now my point is, religion hasn't really brought us any like truth knowledge. And at the end of the day, heavily relies on faith over reason. Reason isn't perfect. Demonstrate to be more reliable than a foundation of faith. Do we know how many gods there are, or at least have a good idea of how many gods there are? Like, are we even close to figuring that out? What are the exact moral codes? Now, I'm not saying my ideal system brings us these moral codes, but I'm not, making the assertion that we know moral truth claims like religions often do and almost always do. Religion has you relying on wishful thinking instead of accepting, likely truths that face our reality. So now that was kind of about how, non-theists are pro-science. I want to touch quick on how theists in general hold positions against science, because I think that's important to address as well. So I'm not going to get into the scientific errors in the Bible for, sake of time. And also, I just think, people listening, they probably already have that set in stone. I'm not going to be the one to convince them here today. But, I'll leave you with at least one fact that I find interesting and was something persuasive to me. That once, a major scientific discovery has been found in history, created rifts in Christianity, such as, discovery of evolution and the earth revolving around the sun. Ones that start violent conflicts entirely, they form entirely new forms of Christianity. Why is that? Why are these offshoots produced from scientific discoveries? Why does it seem that religion is always on the defensive? They're never out there making new claims. And something else to consider, religion once dominated the answers to our world. When locusts are eating our crops, or bugs are eating our crops, whatever bug you want that's eating the crops, farmers used to turn to priests to ask, God help us. But today, we talk to the chemists and like, why can't you get us better insecticide, right? Religion used to be on the forefront of medicine, right? Now when you need surgery, you don't go pray to God anymore. You say thanks to the surgeon with years of experience and years of schooling.
1 minute.
Okay. So, I'm going to kind of fast forward here. So that's kind of like my overall stance in that sense. So, but now I kind of want to raise some ideas for discussion as well that I think will help kind of support my overall point. So first, one of my bigger problems with religion, maybe they can solve this, is they get caught up on the God question, the assertion that we have no way of verifying the God question. And for some reason, if you point this issue out, they take it as this like direct attack on their identity. And this, sometimes leads to questionable justifications and behaviors in the scientific communities. And that's why the God question should be at least mentioned, because, at 1 minute you're talking about the mysteries of God, and then the next minute you're talking about the God that commands, law and commands, truth, and it can't be questioned and stuff like that. So that's just kind of my overall point there. And I'll open it up from there.
Craig?
Okay, is your name Brenden?
Yep.
Just before you get started, Craig, I also want to mention that I have Drew Welty on the line as well as my co-moderator. Hey. So if we get involved, I'm an atheist, he's a Christian. I just like to get an even number so it doesn't become 2-on-1. So go ahead, Craig, you have the floor.
Okay, so this is a little awkward because I came loaded for bear. And just listening to Brenden talking, it's really obvious to me he's a really decent, really bright kid who is not a rabid anti-theist. So let's take the biggest, baddest anti-theist in town, Aaron Ra. Now, the question is, are anti-theists pro-science? The answer is no. If you go back to Michael Jones, okay, Michael Jones is a fairly well-known YouTube guy. He had a debate with Matt Dillahunty. In this debate, it's really interesting to watch because Michael Jones is not the best Christian debater in town. He runs a really strong YouTube. I'm going to talk really fast because I want to get through this quickly, and then I'll address his point specifically. Michael Jones is not the best Christian debater in town. He's probably got one of the best Christian YouTube channels because he does thorough preparation, analytic research, and he brings evidence-based analysis to the table, and he brings all this data to the table. When he was in debate with Matt Dillahunty, it was really interesting because he killed him. And I mean, literally killed him. It was like 100-3. You can go look. Anybody can go look at that debate and see all the comments. Even the atheists were like, I can't believe it. The Christian is the guy bringing all the data-driven analysis, bringing all the facts, all the evidence. And the atheist is just kind of talking on personal experience and just talking, about anecdotal evidence. Fast forward to a couple weeks ago, and he's in a debate with Aaron Ra. Now, Aaron Ra is the biggest, baddest anti-theist in town. And when he talks, he's really powerfully convincing because he talks directly from the heart. And it's really obvious that the guy absolutely 100% case closed, hates religion with every fiber of his being. The problem is the boogeyman that he presents for the benefit of the audience, the boogeyman he actually thinks is religion, bears very little resemblance to the actual faith of Christianity as practiced by people in the real world. It bears almost no resemblance. Why? Because he does what he constantly decries in other people. What he does is obfuscation, sleight of hand, and misdirection. For example, there's three main arguments. There are three things that I want to say about the pro-social benefits of religion. And these are evidence-based conclusions. If you study just the meta-analysis, just the analytics, and look at the studies, you can Google this in 1 second. The pro-social benefits of religion are as follows. 1, social cohesion. 2, meaning in people's lives. And three, probably most importantly, religion gives you an ethical framework that you can take from the abstract into the individual. It gives you an ethics delivery system. That's really important because secular humanists always talk. I watched a video with Matt Dillahunty where he talked about the value of secular morality, but first of all, there's no such real thing as secular morality. And more importantly, there is no system of delivery to get the ethics into the individual in the secular world, whereas religion has a self-participating, a system that we, the religiotards, participate in automatically, organically, by ourselves, where we are getting ethical information and it's being put into us through the practice of religious ritual. Science itself. So the anti-theist case against religion, and this particular person, Brenden, does not strike me as a really rabid anti-theist. He really doesn't. I guarantee when we start talking, we're going to have a civilized, normal conversation. Every anti-theist out there, if you listen to how they actually talk about religion, it's like from another planet. The boogeyman that they are saying religion bears very little resemblance to the actual faith as practiced by most people. The main argument they have in their arsenal goes on misdirection. Here, there are these 4 scriptures here that are homophobic, debatably homophobic. Okay, fine. But there are 106 scriptures in the same book that tell you things like love your neighbor as yourself, love one another. Do those scriptures exist in the same book? Are people just ignoring them? Like, that's how the whole anti-theist argument is predicated. There is tons of evidence of the pro-social benefits of religion, literally tons. Michael Jones brought reams and reams of it to his debate with Matt Dillahunty. Aaron Ra ignores it. He completely ignores it. He doesn't actually look at any evidence that is contrary to his already firmly established mythological framework, his presupposition about religion. Now, are there toxic attributes of religion? Yes. There are. There are the things that the anti-theists always point to. Like there's a go-to study by Aaron Ra where he says, in this study, religious people are 8% more likely to be slightly prejudiced, or 5% more likely, or something like that. That study he brings up almost every time. I bet you anything that study is true, because it makes sense. If you're producing social cohesion in a group of people, and how it works in religion is we all participate in rituals together. Those rituals are really specific, and we practice them together. And that produces an enormous amount of social cohesion. Common sense tells you it's also going to produce somewhat of a discomfort or dislike of outsiders. So I don't doubt that religious people are slightly more likely to be, we're the in crowd and those people are the outsiders. I don't doubt that. But overall, if you look at just the overall pro-social benefits of religion in the real world, there is tons and tons of evidence about its sociological utility and the psychological utility of intrinsic religiosity. Where I thought the topic was saying is, are they pro-science? No, they disregard all of the evidence that undercuts their firmly embedded precept. Why? Because they have too much of an emotional dog in the fight. They get too triggered out by religion. They get too passionately worked up about its destructive, toxic attributes. So they ignore all of the evidence, all of it usually. Aaron Ra likes to say, I've been doing this for 20 years. And he says, no one has ever given me evidence for the existence of God. And as I said in my video, so great, stay an atheist. But the debate that he was in was on, is religion toxic and destructive and dangerous? And for 20 years, he's been on the subject and he never notices any of the evidence to the contrary. That's the part where I think they are anti-science. There is tons of evidence out there of the sociological utility of religion. And there is tons of evidence of the intrinsic, the psychological utility of intrinsic religiosity. Just in an individual person, a religion is producing meaning in their lives, more peace of mind, more strength, or whatever you want to call it. So that's that.
Yep.
What else was I going to?
You have about 4 minutes, so.
How much?
You have about 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. So what else was I going to tell you? Okay, so in the debate with Matt Dillahunty, now there are some people who say that Matt Dillahunty is overrated. I don't think so. I happen to think that Matt Dillahunty is an excellent debater and he's quasi-brilliant. But Michael Jones beat him thoroughly, really, really thoroughly, like 100-3. Why? Because Matt Dillahunty, this is my own guess, but to me, Matt Dillahunty has enough intellectual integrity to not argue against the facts. And Michael Jones was bringing the facts. An enormous amount of data suggesting that the pro-social benefits of intrinsic religiosity, enormous amount. So he wasn't willing to argue against basic reality. So he started saying just because something is useful doesn't mean it's true. When he was in his debate with Jordan Peterson, he started saying the same thing. Just because something is useful doesn't mean it's true, which is basically ceding the main point. I'm not here trying to debate Christianity. If the question is anti-theists, no, anti-theists are not pro-science. When it comes to their firmly embedded presupposition about the toxic attributes of religiosity, they are anti-science. If I were doing a scientific study so we get at the truth of what religion actually is, if I myself were participating, a neutral study, remember, to study something clearly, you have to be dispassionate. If you're too emotionally invested in the answer to the negative, you're not going to be of use in the study. You will be asked to remove yourself. Why? You have too much of a dog in the fight. You're bringing too many biases to the table to study the information clearly and concisely. That's where anti-theists are at today. Now, one of the things that he brought up that I'll address specifically, which I think we can really talk about, because I think he'll agree with me on a lot of stuff, truth claims versus faith claims. That's where people get tripped up. There are truth claims in the Bible. For example, it's better to be a humble person than an arrogant person. That's a truth claim. It's a truth claim that we all can readily assert to and we all kind of know is true, and it's pretty much scientifically verifiable. That claim is mirrored in other faiths. Buddhism will tell you it's better to be humble. Taoism will tell you it's better to be humble. There are then the faith claims. The faith claims are by nature hard to believe. You know, the faith claim like Jesus rising from the dead, things like that. Those are different. If you were just doing a scientific study of religion itself, you would separate those two into two separate categories, because there are the truth claims that are readily accessible and they're easy to understand and they're basically true and they're all throughout the Bible. And then there are faith claims. The faith claims, you kind of have to be an insider. You kind of have to be in the club to believe by faith in the faith claims of the Bible.
1 minute,
but those
Craig.
are different categories. So I guess that's enough for now. I mean, that's enough to go off of. Those are different categories as far as I'm concerned. There's the things in the Bible that everybody knows are true, like love your neighbor as yourself, do unto others as they would do unto you. Those are truth claims. Those are mirrored in other religious texts. And if we were to do a scientific study of them, what religion actually is a ritualized form of putting those type of ethics and values inside of an individual. I guess that's all for now. I think that's enough to chat about.
Okay, so let's. You didn't really steel man his argument. I'm not sure that I can steel man his argument. Let's mix it up a bit.
I wasn't sure exactly what the core of his argument was.
Okay, so
we could try to steel man.
Yeah, let's get past that before we move into a free flowing discussion.
Sure.
Brenden, do you want to?
Yeah.
First of all, can you steel man Craig's argument? Like, he's made a pretty powerful argument here.
Yeah, so I kind of went too long on mine. So because I was expecting kind of his response right here. So
okay.
Some of the ethical stuff. So like we can get into that in a second, but to kind of like, I guess, steel man his. So basically you're pointing out that the social benefits in the sense that, you know, society, maybe it's like more uniting, we more work as one, we follow better moral principles, we, you know, overall we act better and are happier. Is that like a kind of a gist in like 10 seconds?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Sure.
Yeah. So then like kind of my point was my first point, because I was trying to like kind of compare it to, you know, like trying to get to your method of getting to truth. That was kind of my original point, in the sense that I think religion, people that maybe you could say, I guess you could say dogmatically follow religion, and I'm not saying everyone does that, but I think religion often is more apt to cause this than, let's say, like someone more of like on the secular side or an atheist side in how they get to truth, where one method relies more on faith, another relies more on reason. Not saying either one is good or perfect. It's just I find that reason is better, so that you kind of have to use methods that get you to that point. So yeah, that's kind of like my first point there, and then also just kind of pointing out some issues I have when, you know, scientific discoveries come up and kind of religions start changing their tune. But yeah, we can kind of get into that. I don't know if you want me to get into that now.
So what is your argument that anti-theists are pro-science?
Just that they follow their method of getting to knowledge is closer to the scientific method, which would be a pro-science stance, and then also the realities they accept in the world.
And Craig, you want to steelman his argument?
You are saying that science has a tried and true methodology of arriving at the truth. Is that
better
right?
one.
Is that fair? A better one than religion.
Yeah.
A better one than. Okay, I mean, I don't necessarily dispute that. I've said in a lot of my videos, I was raised secular, which means I wasn't really Christian until I was 30 years old. So I always took as my starting paradigm, my principle, that science, unless you have really good evidence to the contrary, really good reason to dispute the basic framework of science, like I've discovered something on my own, here, let me present it. I accept that science is more or less in the ballpark of almost always true. Like my car works, my computer works. I'm not a scientist, so I accept that the scientists are coming to evidence-based conclusions and they are following the facts. What I'm asking, and I'm saying that this is what is going to occur in religion. You take someone like Jordan Peterson, trained as a scientist. He started noticing the sociological utility of religion, coming at it from the science first. That's why he started to become a kind of sort of Christian, because he was like, how could this be so useful? And I think you kind of, or at least you understand what I mean with the putting the ethics and the values into people. I don't see a way to do that outside of religion that will work. Like, I don't know if that's a little bit too philosophical for this conversation.
I can address that point.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah. So I definitely know where you're coming from. Absolutely. It's just I disagree with that point. And I'm not even saying that, religion definitely has had positive effects in history. The question I also find more interesting is it needed today? And this, we can get into a separate discussion here, but I first want to address your points that you made addressing mine. So I find organized religions overall, and I should have said this in the opening statement, it just kind of reiterates my point a little bit better. I think they have more negative effects on society than positive. So that kind of shows that, like, why I hold the stance I do. So now the reason people can and should still have their own individual faith in God if they want is because it isn't for me to tell them what to believe or how to find purpose in this world. I don't know them. But when we start seeing these organized religions forming is when I start seeing dangerous aspects arising. We see negative influence over laws such as, gay marriage, drugs, prostitution, and just sex in general. Targeting Christian faiths here in the U.S. just because it's the most kind of well-known example. But Christians, they don't hold the authority of what is pure in society, right? Historically, especially with monotheism, we see wars over interpretation of their doctrines, willing to kill over disagreements, yada yada. And where you don't see this as much in polytheism. And I know like that stuff's not happening today. So to address that point right away, I do still think these aspects of like defending your faith are still in society that I find concerning. And I'm not saying like the secular society does it as well. I'm trying to look at which ones do it more. So then also, lastly, I want to say like the least religious countries and societies in the world, they tend to be the most happy today. And that's Denmark, Norway, Finland, Canada, Netherlands, Sweden, New Zealand. They're among the least religious countries, and among the most least happy and the most destructive right now are the most religious. And I think that is something that we can talk about data all we want, and we can go back and forth with data, but that data point is something I cannot get over. And then that's when I kind of want to ask you somewhat of a question too, is when you say pro-social benefits, there's a lot there of like, what is a pro-social benefit? What is beneficial to society? That's where I think, like religion is starting to be replaced by different communication methods. Because religion used to be, the reason we made religion is because it was a uniting force, right? I agree with that. It used to be good for that. It keeps people on the same message, same page. But it's not good at that anymore. That's kind of my overall point.
Greg?
Okay, so that's wow. There's a lot of points in there, and those are a lot of standard anti-theist points. So you are an anti-theist. I take it back. For example, the Norway. Well, he seems so mild-mannered. I was like, he's not really an anti-theist. He's probably he's
still mild-mannered. I just
I just hate you. Just don't like religion as much as any of the anti-theists. I got it.
Yeah. I do like some religions though.
Right, probably like you're cool with Taoism, some forms of
kind
Hinduism.
Of the ones I listed in the opening, where it's a lot of times people are not, they don't really align themselves with the faith. They kind of like to pick and choose from faiths, and I feel like that's what almost your argument is. To maybe like I'll make that last claim, and then let you go. Is that I find that people that bring up the pro-social benefits, let's say there is some, right?
Right.
I find that a lot of times it's like, okay, you've aligned yourself with Christianity, but you're saying that that's true for you, but like there's also people that are picking and choosing from religions. But the point is, they're not like dogmatically following a religion, and that's kind of the thing I want people to overcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, actually, that does make sense. One of the things you personally, not talking to any other anti-theist, would be interested in is perennial philosophy. Perennial philosophy is where the claim is that there's a one true God that shows up in all different sorts of faiths. And when different philosophers, different poets start talking about God, for example, in Taoism, St. John of the Cross, they start talking about the same thing. It's a philosophy that you personally would find very interesting. I used to be really into Taoism when I was when I was like 25, for probably some of the same reasons you mentioned. It seemed to me as inherently less dogmatic, more free thinking, a little more esoteric, more philosophical. That's the exact reason why I was attracted to a lot of Eastern philosophies. So I get that completely. Do you want to talk about that, or you want me to keep going on some of the other stuff you said?
I think stick on topic.
Okay, go back to, so Norway, for example, because that comes up a lot with anti-theists. Okay, the problem with citing Norway as an example of I do a lot of videos on this. Citing Norway as a secular example of what happens in a secular society. Look, they've got all the stats. They're doing so much better than we are here in America. The problem is Norway wasn't produced in a vacuum. So first of all, it's way too soon to draw any conclusion about the benefits of secular society, because Norway is 50 years as a secular paradise. So you'd have to fast forward 300, 400 years. That's one point. Another point is that the universities, the libraries, the general body of knowledge was suffused through. They emerged out of Christianity, just like every other country in Western civilization. So you go to the libraries, they're the same books. People like Kant, debatably heavily influenced by Christianity. A lot of the thinking and the thought process, Eastern mysticism didn't start to influence Western civilization until roughly, who's the precursor to Nietzsche? Not Nietzsche, but the world as will and representation. Forget his name right off the top of my head. But that's where Eastern mysticism and the transcendentalists way back in, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, guys like that. Prior to that, most of the thinking was heavily suffused through with Christianity. So Christianity is a huge influence on even Norway today, and it's buried in the consciousness. It's really hard to ferret out. For example, when Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris debated, Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris share about 85% of their worldview is almost identical. And Sam Harris has a universalist ethos, like rights of man, free speech, which I'm relatively certain you share. Now, you can make a really strong case that came directly out of Christianity. Anti-theists don't agree with it. But if we were talking about that, I can make a strong case. I can make a really strong case that Norway emerged out of Christianity. Too early to tell if this secularization of Norway is going to produce the same benefits that you see today, which I won't argue, 500 years down the line.
Yeah, can I interject at that point then?
Sure.
So religion, so this is kind of a problem I have, is in this discussion, at least this is what it feels like to me. It's like you bring up the point of the pro-social benefits and then Norway, and then trying to say like that religions or Christianity, particularly for right now, they brought about so many beneficial things, right? So that means it feels like when people say that, because I've heard this claim a lot, it's almost like they think they own that idea, that it's because of that Christianity is why it happened. And there's like no way to ground that. And that's the issue I have. And then also it's like you're using a very broad sense of religion and the benefits it has, where you're trying to pinpoint it down to religion. We have no way of showing that it is religion that did that. So it's like, so my overall question is, by doing that and being kind of imprecise in that way and redirecting, why is my stance anti-science? And like, why is yours pro-science?
I don't personally think I'm redirecting. If you go to Europe today, okay, the all of the things created in the name of religion. If you travel to, for example, Florence, Italy, first thing, there's still tourist attractions today that draw people's attention. First thing you're going to see is the Duomo in the middle of the town. You go to Cologne, the first thing you're going to look at is the cathedral.
Yeah,
so
these
religion,
are appeals to authority.
No, that's not. That's not what I'm doing.
Let him finish. Go ahead, one at a time, guys.
Those are direct evidence of those were all built in the name of religion. Then you go into the Uffizi Gallery, you're going to see painting after painting after painting on the wall. That's so much that they're crammed into the room. Been there, seen it myself. Okay, those are directly inspired. That is literal, tangible evidence of the pro-social benefits of religion. Now, or I don't know if you personally are going to say this, Matt Dillon would say, you don't need religion to do that. But that's what religion directly produced. Okay, no, you might not need religion to build a cathedral, an architectural masterpiece, but I can't imagine what else might inspire that to that degree. Jordan Peterson does a great little sermonette on this where he talks about the sacrifice to the community over a span of something like 700 years to build the Cologne Cathedral. What it actually cost in terms of making this architectural masterpiece, it was a sacrifice, and they were doing it under the banner of religion. So religion specifically produced that. That's not misdirection, as far as I'm concerned. That's
right.
A tangible outproduct of, we the religiotards were doing that under the banner, in the name of the glory of God. We were trying to give glory to God. So we're mass producing in a lot of ways, all of this, really cool, beautiful stuff. I don't think that's misdirection. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I guess a better way of saying that would be, so you're kind of trying to say that, what religion produced, religion produced it, thus it's good. So we have to still kind of clarify what, pro-social benefits are. And I think I have some ways to kind of address your point still, to address it more directly, kind of, because when you say pro-social benefits, would you say, it's unites and brings about moral behavior, right? We're still agree on that part?
Yes.
So I want to address in the sense that we have nothing to show that religion or religious faith is necessary for moral behavior. You can claim that in history, but it's correlation causation there that you can't prove that in any way. And we can go in an argument about that. I don't know if we wanted to do that today, because I think there's other stuff we can hit. But like, for example, like necessitating a supernatural being for morality is saying, or even at least like the belief in it, is saying that morality is in some way unnatural. And I find that claim absurd. And I'm not saying you're making that. You can say if you're making that or not. But morality of some form is natural, whether it's subjective or objective. Topic again for another day. But whatever your stance for morality exists. Other social animals show this. Chimps, rats, pigs, dogs, cows, like any animal that are basically around each other and mingle. They show signs of some form of ethical codes. Like I don't really want to say like scientific ethical codes. I guess you could say that, because we run into the is-ought problem. But morality exists in all society, no matter which God they believe in, or even whether they believe in God at all. So like the other problem I have is find that religion, at least nowadays, because I'm not talking about history. We can bring up the benefits in history, but we can also bring up a lot of negatives. And that's why I don't even like talking about the history of religion. I like talking about the benefits today, right? So many, from truly understanding, like I think religion prevents you from truly understanding kind of this state of suffering. We are social animals, and that's how religion came about, by us being social animals. That does not make it a necessity for acting good. But I've heard you address this in a video, so I know you might try to push back on this, but our empathy, it has us, caring about what others think and feel, and our relations with others. If you live alone in your own like self-centered world, you're probably going to be unhappy unless you're a psychopath. So Like here is the ethical code I think we follow. It's this kind of principle of compassion, or maybe it's a principle of ending human suffering. That's a typical like kind of secular response. Setting it in stone, I just think it's kind of a good one to follow, and I don't think religion's necessary for it because it's kind of ingrained in us as like part of the cosmos or kind of part of evolution. So thinking about this principle, before someone hurts someone else, they were hurt. A violent act begins, with a violent desire. Someone with a violent desire had their peace and happiness disturbed, and that's why they have those. No one wants to stay in that state of anger, pain, and hatred. These thoughts don't allow you to live a peaceful life. Everyone wants to get out of it. So it's like, how do we get out of it? Is it religion? And that's where we let's say we treat each other with respect because we don't want others to be in this like dangerous state of mind. Religion doesn't rid us of the anger and pain and all that today. I don't see that at all. And that's where I brought up my stats from those countries. Is we see in these more developed countries that religion is kind of fading away. And I think that's something that we need to address. And we can talk about history all day, but history has some very gray areas and some very bad areas. And religion also did some really good things. I never denied that. And that's why I think we need to kind of bring it to the modern day.
Craig, I'll let you do a rebuttal, and then I have some questions. And I don't, Drew, are there questions from the chat? I've pulled out a couple. Okay. So,
yeah, I've got a couple as well.
So go ahead and reply, Craig, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, we're not that far from the same page. You do admit that religion's done some positive things, and then you point out that religion does some negative things, which I will accept too. I might push back on whether it's intrinsic to religion or intrinsic to human nature. So we're not that far removed. The question is, the question is what all scientists would ask dispassionately without a dog in the fight. And anti-theists, not you particularly, but anti-theists in general, do not ask this dispassionately. They ask it with a firmly committed dog in the fight. So they direct you to only the negative attributes of religion. Only, here's the Inquisition over here. Here's a time where these scientists were persecuted in the name of religion. Then you take it to the present day. I hear what you're saying. I'm just, what my argument is, like, for example, the present social history of the United States, we have an ongoing experiment in the destruction of religion. Circa 1955, United States of America, religion was practiced en masse by something like 89% of the population. It's not some sort of mysterious coincidence that you could leave your doors unlocked at night. Religion had a dramatic, when people started walking away from religion, there was a dramatic effect sociologically. 1965, the breakups of the families, divorce rates started going up, social disillusion started coming hand in hand with the destruction of mainstream religion. They seem to go hand in hand together. Why they haven't happened in Norway yet, it's not quite crystal clear. Norway has not been a secular paradise, for all that many years. So we don't really know. I mean, if you and I were just to sit down and have a reasoned conversation, which I can tell just by interacting with you, we easily could. We could actually do, cost-benefit analysis. We could actually clearly ferret out without emotions. I'm the Christian, so I got a dog in the fight too. But we could clearly just do an analysis of what the behavior is actually producing, why are people participating in it, and are the net effects on society at large positive or negative? And I think we'd clearly find out that they're positive. Clearly positive. Today, even in today's world where, everybody hates religion. So I guess that's all. You can ask questions, Em.
Well, the debate is really over whether or not anti-theists are pro-science or anti-science. Brenden, you mentioned in your intro that theists can be anti-science too, and that's not really a question of the debate, because both sides are capable of being anti-science. You made a claim here. You said there's no evidence that God works as a moral enforcer. I mean, I know of plenty of studies that show God works as a moral enforcer. That's like a basic thing. So my question is, like, if we present evidence to you that there is pro-social benefits, that God works as a moral enforcer, a lot of times people, and I agree with Craig here, they're committed to a position that doesn't allow them to accept that evidence. In the same way theists are committed to a position that doesn't allow them to accept evidence at sometimes. My problem is that the theists aren't standing under the banner of science. They aren't standing under the banner of science and saying, we are the pro-science community. So it doesn't ring as hypocritical for me when theists deny science, which they tend to do. But when the anti-theists do, you've also made a claim here that the most secular countries are the least religious, which is true, but they also happen to be the most wealthy countries. And I would make the argument that wealth makes people happy. They don't necessarily need religion. I point this out again and again, but it's like saying it to a wall. It doesn't sink in. So that's part of my argument that anti-theists need to step up their game on the pro science side. So
Yeah.
I'll let you comment on my analysis.
Yeah, so like, and I get the argument with the less wealthy countries. I'm also kind of arguing from the stance that we are in. Like, it's like when you get to a point, do you need it anymore? But then also, you're like, the pro-social benefits thing is something I think we're still getting caught up on. Like the God enforcer thing, we might have been talking about like two different ways of saying like what God as an enforcer is. So like when I say God as an enforcer, it means like it's almost like you have to accept God to be the enforcer, which I think you would agree with, Adam, based on your point.
Yeah,
but like
I do
the other point I want to make though, I can address that is, it's like, okay, I feel like we're still kind of disagreeing about pro-social benefits because it's such a vague, kind of generalization. Like what is that? But also it's okay. So let's say you accept that God as the enforcer. Now what is that God enforcing? Like what are you trying to enforce?
Well, we don't know how many murders a year are prevented by religion. Like if you want to do an accurate cost benefit analysis, you need to do a scientific cost benefit analysis. You need to find out how many people were planning on killing their spouse when they found out she was cheating and didn't do it because someone at church made them think maybe it's not a good idea to do it. Like you don't know these things.
Okay.
You're making
Right.
assertions without evidence. You're saying we don't need religion anymore. Like, where's your evidence? Bring some evidence.
Hold up. No. Okay. Look, no, you as well, because like that point is like we don't know how many deaths are prevented from people not believing in religion. Like that point is like null and void. So like my overall point is okay. So like you say that, but like what Bennett, like the question is, are anti-theists like pro-science, right?
Correct. Yes.
So the point is, like what you just addressed there did in no way say why my position is anti-science. We don't have that data. Like, so if we don't have that data, you can't go at me and say that I'm being anti-science, because I fully admit, like, maybe that data is out there. I haven't seen it. But that's not like a point at me though.
You're making a claim though. You're making a scientific claim. You're saying religion does more harm than good.
So are you though. That's my point.
That is your. I'm not making what claim am I making?
You're saying that the religion has the pro-social benefits, right? We have not established that religion has these today in the U.S. has these pro-social benefits. We've given data of how, anti-theists have some data on their side that show, hey, look at the pro-social benefits of this. And then we have, in third world countries, we have some pro-social benefits of this. It's like this pro-social benefits is very vague.
Craig cited the studies though. We have empirical evidence on that.
You didn't really address mine.
Okay.
That's my point is like you're saying that I'm being anti-science, but if anything, we're either both being pro-science or we're both being anti-science. Like there's no clear distinction here that you've established.
Craig, I'll let you step in. I feel like I'm taking over for you.
Yeah, I thought you were on my
side. Yeah, exactly. That's the atheist. No, that's okay. So in terms of the science, if you go back, the thing that I tried to say at the beginning, and this is not. This is YouTube, okay? So nobody's going to go digging through, meta-analytical studies for yourself.
Right.
If you guys want to do a quick study, this is to the audience, not to you necessarily, Brenden. If you guys want to do a quick study, go to the go to the YouTube video, Michael Jones versus Matt Dillahunty, because he cites almost every single study you can think of on specifically the pro-social benefits of religion. Okay, and you can go. I'm pretty sure he's got them all cited in the. It was on the former Non Sequitur show, which, you know, rest in peace, no longer exists. But pretty sure he cited every study. Now, Matt Dillahunty, okay, yielded the point. Just because something is useful doesn't make it true. Doesn't mean it's true. So he's only concerned with, does God exist? We're not debating that. What we are debating is, are anti-theists pro-science? I'm saying no, not necessarily you, Brenden, so don't take this personally. But no, if you go look at Aaron Ra, he ignores, very unscientifically, completely and utterly ignores every single piece of evidence contrary to his position all the time, because he has too much. Scientists have to be dispassionate and they have to analyze the facts. I'm not accusing Brenden of being dispassionate at all. He doesn't have this, like, he's not a rabid anti-theist. But you go look at the rabid anti-theists and they will tell you religion sucks. Then you go, why? And they'll route you back to the same couple cherry-picked examples. And then you bring up the examples contrary to the argument on the positive, and they pretend like you didn't say it or it isn't there. With Brenden, we'd have a more reasonable, balanced conversation where we take both sides of the argument. And I'm sure that he'd allow that there are cathedrals being built that were built in the Middle Ages in the name of religion. There were paintings painted in the Middle Ages in the name of religion. And then he'd tell me, okay, but these are the negative things. Religiotards tend to be homophobic. And then we could have an honest discussion where we're bringing in the meta-analysis, and then we're honestly ferreting out and trying to really, really elucidate, because that's what science does, digs at the truth. What's really producing the homophobia? Is it the religion? I'm not 100% convinced it is. Your humble religiotard, as religious as any of them, not particularly homophobic. I think that's more culture. Now, correlated, yes, to religion, because I'm from Westchester. Grew up outside of New York City, and I was a theater major. So I've known hundreds upon hundreds of gay people. Most of the people who are really firmly committed Christians tend to come from more rural backgrounds where they'll meet maybe one or two gay people. That produces homophobia. In my mind, there one day will be studies that show you that that's actually what producing the homophobia per se. But I'm pretty sure that if Brenden and I had just a conversation, you know, I don't want him to feel put on the spot, because, you know, we're not trying to put you on the spot, Brenden. I came ready for, like, you know, to go after anti-theists. And again,
you guys are both doing great. Drew, do you have questions? I have one question from the chat. Do you have questions?
Yeah, I have questions. So if you want me to start asking questions, I've got like 6 or 7 here.
Do you have any questions yourself? You want to chime in?
It's slightly off topic. I guess it's just about what he just said. Why do you think that it's purely a social thing in regards to homosexuality?
Craig?
I wouldn't say purely.
Oh.
I wouldn't say purely. That's for me, right?
Yeah, that's for you.
I wouldn't say purely, but for example, this is just my own little take on how phobias are produced. You don't meet enough of the particular person that you're phobic about. Because, for example, I've met like hundreds of gay people. And when you take theater classes, you interact with, there'll be 15 people in the class, 5 guys, 3 of the guys will be gay. So you interact with homosexuals all the time. So it automatically, all of your biases and prejudices about what they may be like goes out the window, because you interact with them constantly. So it takes it away. If you grow up in a rural town, there's one gay guy in the middle of the town and he's a raging queen, that's what you're going to think homosexuals are. And you're going to carry that forth. There's just nothing to counteract. I don't necessarily think the culture produces it either. There's just nothing to counterbalance it. That's just my own pet theory. You can dispute that if you want.
Can I address that a
Go
little
ahead,
bit,
Brenden.
or just add some things to that a little bit? So I get what you're saying, and this is more, I'm not going to like really assert this. I guess I somewhat align myself with it. But we can directly kind of correlate, like the founding of Christianity, for example. There's a lot of homophobia going on then. And we can correlate that into like, maybe that's how I got into doctrine. But the issue, so like, this is where like, okay, maybe a Christian can change their form of faith and say they don't have to be homophobic anymore, right? I agree with that, sure.
Right.
But so like, here's my problem. This gets back to the problem with organized religion, and I think an example that kind of supports my claim here is, I think that so like, we can connect that to that was the culture then. It got into doctrine. So once it got into doctrine, it became, now this was the authority of God. We had no way of proving that it came from God. So then it stayed in doctrine because they thought it was from the authority of God. So then it stayed in the culture for so long. So my question is, if we want to talk about pro-social benefits, is, okay, be open to the possibility that if it didn't get into a dogmatic kind of religious-based, organized religious-based doctrine, maybe we would not have the homophobia for as long as we did. And that's like something I've kind of aligned with. But if you have something against that, I'm open.
Okay. It's not really against it, but by the same logic, okay, because the Bible has 4 or 5 debatable homophobic scriptures, okay, maybe 10. I don't know. Go look at the atheist website. They got it all listed. But it has 106 scriptures that tell you to love your neighbor as yourself, don't judge, judge not lest ye shall be judged. Those scriptures would be affecting your behavior too, and they clearly tell you to judge not lest ye shall be judged. They clearly tell you not to judge people. So the argument from again, and I don't like asserting this against you in particular, because I came loaded for bear. I came loaded for like some of the really triggered out anti-theists.
Right.
Because I hear them say this argument all the time, and it drives me crazy because they ignore the passages from the exact same book that actually would produce beneficial behavior. And the passages from the same book that would actually produce beneficial behavior are the scriptures that people talk about in the churches. They're the ones written on the wall. They're the ones, if you go to a Christian Twitter feed today, unless you go to a psycho-Christian like a Matt Powell, you go to a normal, mainstream, reasonably sensible Christian Twitter feed today, you'll see the positive scriptures, the ones telling you love your neighbor as yourself, do good unto others, telling you to do good deeds. And nobody argues that those scriptures are good, are positive. People actually obeyed the scriptures to love the neighbor as yourself and did think it was God's command. This is my command, that you love one another. Then Christians would behave exceptionally well, and we wouldn't be necessarily homophobic. That's the only thing with that particular.
I have one last point off of that.
Sure.
So this kind of brings it back to my overall point of like, on the morality side of things, and even I guess you could say the pro-social benefit side of things. Like, when you say that, when you address my claims in that way, where you're saying, okay, well, there's these negative ones, but look at all the people that are interpreted in this good way, right? Okay, that's a fair claim. But the point is that, okay, so like, let's say you look at a secular morality. Secular morality comes with a lot of things involved. I admit that. There's a lot of discussion, but I like the discussion within that secular morality. There's people that are problematic in the secular morality community, but there's also people that are really open-minded. So like, my overall point is, so like, let's say, I know Craig, you don't accept this, but I think from watching some of Adam's videos, I think he accepts this, is, he's an atheist, right? So my point is, morality came about, and I kind of said this in my original statement, from like the kind of this need and this empathy need, right? And it's like, okay, now we're just like interpreting it how we want. Like, morality is kind of like in flux, it's kind of changing and flowing with what is needed. So then it's like, okay, we can't ground that being a theist has these foundational pro-social benefits. So like, that's what my point is that what you've said and what everyone has said is in no way said that, me at least, because I still am an anti-theist. Like, I might not be as like, militant, but I think the militant ones are having their own logical and reasoning issues. My point is, they haven't pointed out that why my stance of being anti-theist is not pro-science. And you haven't really shown why yours is pro-science, because, there's a lot of disagreement about what these pro-social benefits are, because the landscape we have to look at isn't by no way clear about which one's better and which way to go forward. But at least I think it's more clear on my side about how we should go about, and that organized religion has had a lot of problems because people are already doing the whole like secular religion thing by taking their own personal truths and personal interpretations of morality. That's my overall point in that side of things.
Drew, let's go to questions. We're at an hour. You have a quick rebuttal, Craig, real quick?
Yeah, really quick rebuttal. You, by definition, are much more less pro-science. If you were the embodiment of every anti-theist, I wouldn't have said anti-theists are anti-science. I'm talking about the triggered out ones. They're the ones who are building the boogeyman, and they're presenting religion as a boogeyman. You don't seem to be doing that. We seem to be having more of a reasonable conversation about some of the positive and negative attributes, and you're not doing a lot of mental hocus pocus on me, trying to convince me that religion is pure poison. Some of the others are. That's the person I thought this was addressed to. I didn't think it was addressed to a reasonable, somewhat scholarly kind of anti-theist. You know, yeah, I'm not crazy about religion because of XYZ PDQ, and then we can have a normal conversation about XY PDQ. That's by definition more dispassionate and not quite as anti-science. So I'm not necessarily pinning it on you. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Drew,
that's
questions?
Fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start with okay. So I don't know anything about the validity of this claim. I'm just going to ask the question I'm just going to ask the question. I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just going to ask it. So this is from Sunbro. He said, this is in response to Brendan's claims about Nordic country or secular countries being happier. So this is what this is in response to. So he said, wait, doesn't some of those Nordic countries also have the highest suicide rates? I don't know if that's true or not, but I guess it's a question.
It's true. I think it's true of Sweden. I don't know about Norway.
Yeah, I didn't mention Sweden though, I don't think, did I? But yeah, I actually don't know if they have a higher suicide rate.
Yeah. Okay. So if you don't know, we just can't address this, frankly. So
I don't know
yeah. I'm curious, Brenden. Like, what would change your mind? You're obviously you're taking a side on the you think the evidence that religion does more harm than good is greater than the evidence that it does less harm. One of the things that convinced me, what made me really question that claim, is just the fact that religion is so widespread in so many places where people are adopting it voluntarily. So I feel like people, just from a libertarian point of view, they're very much, they're deciding if this is something better or worse for their lives. And then obviously they're making the decision that it's better because they're opting in. So that to me makes me feel like it's obviously doing more good than harm for these people on an individual basis. And is that a cumulative benefit for society? Nobody's denying that intergroup conflict is a problem and that can happen. But my question is, it seems to be a relatively minor problem compared to the benefits that you get. Like, my basic question is, what evidence would change your mind?
I mean, like a lot of maybe packed down data, but I do think I have like a couple ways to somewhat address what you said, in the sense that I think we often, because like it's not there in the data, and this is where I don't think you can and this is why. So like 2 points. So one is the data, we don't have that for one, and then two, it's okay. You're correlating things like what aspects of religion bring it about. Is it the communication aspect? The shared belief system? What is it that brings about these pro-social benefits you're talking about? And is it still religious if you don't believe in God? If you do believe in God and you don't align with a religion, are they under this umbrella? So there's a lot of areas there where it's like kind of odd to me to say, oh, Christianity is obviously pro-social and good for society. We can obviously see that. There's not data for that. We'd have no way of proving that. Then my other point is, and this is where I kind of just look to somewhat history and look at where we are today. And this is kind of on the pro-science side. So my point is, religion has lost a lot of turf. I kind of brought this up in my opening statements, but because, they were not good at, farming, healthcare, or even mental health. The world is becoming more secular. The world is becoming less religious. The world is accepting more scientific truths, accepting that science is the way to go to verify knowledge. And that's where I see it's hard for me to overcome that, in the sense that, okay, you can talk about the communicative and the community aspects of religion, but that doesn't mean it's a necessary need to be pro-social. where we have already these things arising that are freeing themselves from the shackles of religion, because religion we can see in history has held us back as well, but we don't want to go down that route again because it was back and forth about examples of good and bad, right? So that's kind of like my point there, where religion.
You're not really answering the question. What evidence would convince you otherwise? I mean, you're not.
You could clearly show.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I kind of did. I said if you can clearly show in the data that and you can directly correlate people's actions and the community aspects, or like at least even define. So like if that happens with the data, but that has to come after you define what exactly you mean by religion has these pro-social benefits. Religion is such like a loaded term that has so many different definitions. I try to give one definition, but people, I often find like in this type of discussion as well, is they often like redirect what they mean by religion. Well, I meant this. It has pro-social benefits on this side, it has pro-social benefits on this side, and like this. And that's where I can't put myself into that viewpoint, because there's no clarity there, where I find like I don't want to say, okay, I guess you could say like a secular viewpoint, not always. It has this belief system that it's like open to new truths. It's open to being wrong. The ones that do it well. Me and Craig agree that there's some problematic people in the atheist community and the anti-theist community. But the people that I like to think are somewhat like me remain open to the possibility that their truth is wrong. So I'm open to the idea of being wrong on this, but I have not seen any clarity, even close.
And what would provide that clarity? This is why I brought up the thing that made me question the anti-theist belief, because the fact that people readily adopt religion, no questions asked, they're obviously doing a cost-benefit analysis in their own lives and saying, this benefits me, I'm in, right? I'm saying that is evidence for me. I'm asking you, what is evidence for you?
That is evidence in a way, but the point is okay. So like, let's say people accept that, right? Mm-hmm. Now they've accepted that as an individual. Now, when the individuals group up together and they form these more formality forms of organized religions, is when you start getting this stronger identity around the community. And then when you say something against that community, they become dogmatically angry. The anti-theists are doing this too. I would say that these, like the secular community, the anti-theist community, and the atheist community, and whatever, even the ones in Buddhism and all that, like the more Eastern traditions, they're not as dogmatically following that individual truth they follow, right? So like that's kind of my overall point is like you're bringing up, you can make the individual decision. Yes. And like I make individual decisions. I pick and choose from Buddhism and whatnot. But that isn't saying that like religion itself is like this necessity for like all these pro-social benefits, when you're assuming that it's this religious aspect that does it. But we don't have a way to define like what you mean by that.
Well, you're making an assumption too. You're assuming that religion is the essential component to people ganging together in groups and going after people. Feminism does the same thing, and they aren't worshiping a god. So I would argue that it's part of human psychology and not part of religion.
Right. But I would argue too. It's intrinsic to. That's one of the things I argued on my first debate on this particular topic, is that the behaviors that gets ascribed to religion, which does somewhat correlate religion, are not intrinsic to the religion itself. So the dogmatic and the tribalism, that's one of the things that get pinned on religious all the time. You take religion away, just as you pointed out. See, you're not as clear-cut an example. Like I say, you're not particularly anti-science. You seem more grounded, dispassionate, and reasonable, which is the hallmarks of the beginning of the scientific process. You're dispassionate. You're not 150% convinced that you're right. But for example, if you look at the actual atheist community, the operating theory was once you take religion away, everyone's going to behave really well towards each other. Go look at them. They're at each other's throats. If that theory were true, they fight constantly and they fight all the time and they fight over everything under the sun. And they did exactly what I said 2 years ago. They're starting to separate themselves into weird tribes. Lack theist versus this type, or lack atheist versus this type of atheist. Tribalism starts to show up once you take religion away. It starts to show up in other forms. And when you take religion away from the body politic, there's a pseudo-religious type of that starts to enter into the body politic and the behavior of individual tribalism. My group, I know people who are really, really dogmatic about being punk rockers. Honest to God, really, really hardcore dogmatic about it. You got to wear these type of laces versus these type of laces, down to the uniform. And I know people like that about being a Democrat. I know people dogmatic about being conservatives, really dogmatic, really tribalistic, having nothing to do with religion. So it correlates with religion, yes, but I don't think it's intrinsic to religion. And just by the virtue of how you talk about it, you aren't one of the anti-science anti-theists. Cool. You aren't. You're way more grounded in reality, talking about, you're not all, religion is terrible, blah, blah. You're not. You're having a more of a reasonable conversation.
Quick rebuttal, Brenden, and we got to get to questions. So,
yeah, but I have one point to say to you to maybe clarify a little bit better. If you can say yours first, though, if you want.
No, go ahead, Brenden. Quick rebuttal. Let's get to questions.
So basically, just like a couple sentences here. So like the world, like I said, was kind of adopting these new scientific discoveries, innovations, and technology, right? You agree with that, right?
Yeah.
And Craig and Adam, because I'm kind of addressing Adam because Adam brought up some. So like we see a decrease in religious faith across the world, not because of a social decay, but because the religious benefits I find are fading away. Like that's to me is a correlation of why they're accepting these new scientific discoveries, at least in my interpretation. But what was once the uniting community ideal is being replaced by modern mechanisms for communication. So that's like my point there. And then my point about religion itself, just real quick, is that religion I find becomes problematic when it becomes dogmatic. And I do think that religions are more apt to become dogmatic because of kind of the belief in God usually and monotheism. That's when it becomes problematic. And that's when I don't see the pro-social benefits nearly as much as you're trying to paint the picture as.
Do you want to go to the super chat, Drew?
Yeah, I was just about to do that.
Okay.
So we got a super chat for $5 from Darwinian Realism. And the question is, what is the balance between religion's pro-social behaviors and its hostility towards outsiders? Is the balance better for atheism?
I personally, what I brought up is a real world example of no. Atheists get just as tribalistic as Christians, particularly anti-theists. There are some who aren't. I'll give you that. A lot I know personally who aren't, but there's a whole mess of them who are. And as far as I can tell, they're just as tribalistic and they're just as inclined to, that's the outsider, go get after him as any religion. Keep in mind, I'm a really, really, really firmly committed Christian. It's not so obvious in this particular debate because I'm trying to stay on topic. I don't consider myself dogmatic in the slightest, even a tiny bit. I mean, you could be a satanic anarchist. I don't care. If you're cool to me, I'm cool right back. So I don't see it as intrinsically linked, but go ahead.
Brenden, you want to address the balance?
Yeah. So I would say that, because this is what I get back to is atheism, I think, and even agnosticism or whatever you want to call it, does a better job at bringing themselves to truth claims. And that's kind of where my overall view ends up being, is that religion at the end of the day has to rely on faith. And then and this isn't a perfect system. I said that in the opening statement, and I don't think it is. It's me weighing the positive and negatives of which one is better and which one produces better outcomes and stuff like that. And I think atheism and kind of the secular community, I guess you could say, does a better job of coming to those claims and being open to changing those claims. There's still tribalism that occurs, but they're more willing to change their opinions than someone that relies on faith.
Well, this is a great discussion. We'll go another 10 minutes. We'll answer a couple of questions, and then we'll call it a day. Drew?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. So here are two questions that are kind of getting at a similar thing. And this is kind of something y'all are both just off on. So maybe you can kind of wrap it up with these questions. So Ian Conway asks, Brenden, do you agree that people are creating religious substitutes that have all the same pitfalls as organized religion? And man is not his own master asks, Brenden, are you against religion or dogmatism? And I think you could also add in tribalism in that. So I guess the questions are essentially about, is it the religion that's the problem, or is it the dogmatism and tribalism that kind of results from that? And do you agree that that's happening in places that are trying to replace organized religion?
Okay. Yeah. So dogmatism and tribalism are the issue. And I do think it's happening in the places that are kind of losing their religion. However, I do think that religion is more apt to produce those tribal outcomes and maintain those tribal outcomes, those tribal viewpoints, and that identity. They feel more attacked when their identity is attacked. Like I said, it still occurs. I do think it's like part of human nature. Maybe we'll adapt beyond it and evolve. That'd be cool. But yeah, I still think that the reason I still kind of hold my position is that it's less apt to produce that tribalism, because that's how I got to where I am. I got rid of a lot of tribalism on my side because I realized like we don't know what's going on. So yeah.
Is that based on anything other than just like your intuitions about religion versus secular communities, or is it just, or do you have anything to back that up?
So it's like I would bring it back to, I don't have like, can look it up later, but I don't have it right here in front of me. But overall, it comes down to kind of the method of getting to it. One relies on the scientific method, which isn't perfect, but I do think through the data it shows that it does a better job at coming to those truths on a reliable, consistent method, basically because it doesn't rely on analogies. We can directly correlate those things.
Okay, so you're postulating that the emphasis on the scientific method would make secular groups less dogmatic.
Yeah, tend to be. It still occurs, but less. Yes.
Okay.
Can I address that quickly or no?
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Sure.
Okay, so back in when we go back to my 1955, my analogy, where the population was basically 90%, 89% of the population bought into a much more mainstream, softer type of Protestant ecumenical religion. It was by nature, because it had to appeal to people en masse, it was by nature a little less dogmatic and rigid. When that started to dismantle, that's when you see spooky evil religions like the Manson family and like Scientology. It's a cause-effect relationship.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's a cause-effect relationship. Nature abhors a vacuum. And I kind of think that he sort of agrees with me that the dogmatic and tribalistic behavior is intrinsic to human beings, irrespective of whatever they're practicing. It's intrinsic to human beings. They rally around whatever flag you plant in the middle of them, and they tend to get tribalistic and dogmatic about it. I think that actually healthy, spiritual, ecumenical type, moderate types of religion, Christianity, let's say, Christian, because that's what I am, actually is a bulwark against insane religions, cult-like cuckoo clock religions. I think they provide a buffer against those type of nutty. You wouldn't want necessarily like a Ned Flanders to move next door to you, but you would far prefer him to Charles Manson and the Manson family. And he's a bulwark against that. Anyways, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the Manson family situation, this is the problem I have with
we only have about 5 more minutes, so let's go to another question. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to ask one more serious question, and I think there's a funny question we can end on. So, this question is for Brenden again. This is from Karana Ashley. Where does secular morality come from? Vacuum, ?
It comes from human creation, just like religion. It's a myth that we create to coexist.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
Right, but you're saying it's a myth that we create to coexist, but let's take away the myth that actually works and has worked for.
So
let's take away the myth that works.
Wait, that you're adding to the myth. Like that's like the idea of a myth. Like secular morality is a myth and a story and a narrative we create too. But like part of religion is they have this supernatural deity that they rely on. They're two different types of myths.
Right, but that religion, you do understand that, especially if you don't believe in God, then you have to account for that fact that religion was created by the ground floor up, and it survived for 1,500 years because it addresses mythologically some of the central problems of human nature that we are discussing today. We get rid of it, you're going to have to recreate all these myths.
Right.
Where are they going to come from?
My point is the secular morality, for example, it directly accepts the realities of the universe in that we create morality so that it's more apt to be able and willing to change based on what outcomes it produces. And that's my other issue with religion is it relies on these stances as though it's coming from God, and they hold on to those. But where in a secular case, you're more apt to be open to your opinion being wrong because you accept the reality that you don't know everything about the universe. You don't know everything about morality. You don't have all the data. That stuff's still coming in. And that's the major difference I have. the myth. It's like accepting the myth that we create morality. But once you accept that, all of a sudden morality becomes in flux. When morality comes in flux, you start being able to guide yourself towards what is producing good outcomes instead of dogmatically defending your identity, because your identity is always changing.
Right.
Why?
But that
So go ahead. Sorry, Craig.
so if secular morality were to actually work, you kind of already analyzed how it would work. They'd have to rebuild myths and stories they'd tell each other, just like a religion, and they'd have to come on moral codes and precepts. I sincerely doubt they would outdo love your neighbor as yourself, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
What does outdo mean?
What possible moral presuppositions are you going to plant in people that are going to be superior to the teachings of Jesus Christ? You're going to go back to the ones that are sourced to religion, okay? Because there isn't any more impressive, more astoundingly brilliant morals than are found in the religious texts themselves. That's my point.
Brenden,
and you have a
Brenden,
delivery system.
are you going to copy paste from Christianity?
You're going to copy paste from Christianity.
Okay,
That's exactly what secular humanism
let me
is.
directly address that quick. Okay, so no, I'm not going to copy and paste from
You're not
Christianity.
going to copy paste Jesus rising from the dead, but you're going to copy paste the ethical teachings of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, okay, let me say something addressing that point, though, because I get what you're saying, but I completely disagree. Because we can also directly correlate with the rise in Christianity. It became a direct kind of address to the Greeks. And like, for example, we can trace back, Christianity borrowed a lot from Aristotle and Plato and all that. So if you accept that, it's like, okay, so who am I allowed to choose from? I can pick and choose and like take their argument at what it is. But the point is, I'm not going to say I'm a Christian because it holds all the truths in the world. My point is that I'm open to them changing. And if you accept this idea of Christianity as the best, it is the best now, no one will ever address it, no one will ever take it down. It turns into dogmatism. And that's the thing I cannot overcome.
I kind of agree with what you just said. It's not really what I said. If it's how I said it, it's not really what I meant.
We're running out of time here, Craig. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Drew,
wrap it up. That's fine.
Drew, last
last
question.
Okay, so I shouldn't ask this question because it's really just kind of silly, but it's a fun way to end. So
we'll do it anyway.
This is from Captain Skarma. Is the lowering numbers of religious attendance in churches science's fault, or is it Twitter's fault for making people lose faith in humanity?
Well, I'm going to go with
actually an awesome question.
I'm going to go with Twitter. What about you?
I mean,
if Twitter creates the Democratic nominee, it's totally Twitter's fault. If whoever wins a Twitter prompt, go ahead. Sorry.
Brenden, you got
Twitter makes me lose my faith in humanity.
So he's a Twitter. Drew, do you want to weigh in?
Twitter's evil. Twitter is pure evil in human form.
So
it possesses your brain and it destroys society.
So, all right, this has been a great dialogue. I'm going to give you guys like a 1-minute closing statement, and then I'll go to. I'll just plug my next week, and we'll be done. So, let's see, Drew, who should go first? I always forget. Brenden, right?
Did Brenden start?
Yes, Brenden started.
Yes.
Okay, then Brenden should start here.
So, Brenden, you got a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So basically, I guess just religion. I feel like humans create a religion, and humans create a religion out of a sense of community, and also a big reliance on, let's say, like empathy, I guess we can call it. So we treat each other with respect because we don't want others to be in this dangerous state of mind, for our own sake and your sake and everyone's sake. It doesn't keep us from acting immorally. Religion doesn't, rid us of, anger and pain and hatred. It hasn't shown that. And I just think that empathy factor, and we can just create a better moral system and be open to different truths. And that's why Antitheist is still pro-science.
Craig?
Okay, so I came loaded for the bear of the topic, not actually for this particular person who I do not find representative of the main body of anti-theists out there. But as a general rule, yes. As a general rule, yes, anti-theists are pro-science. The boogeyman that they present as religion bears very little. They talk about religion as it's all wackadoodle snake handlers and like crazy people who, believe in spaceships and things like that. There is such a thing as mainstream, down-to-earth, sensible, well-educated Christians. There have been for centuries, and there are pro-benefits to these people. Now, those particular group of anti-theists, which he is not representational of, are completely and 100% anti-science in that they do not accept any evidence to the contrary that doesn't firmly back up their firmly embedded presupposition that religion sucks. And then when you talk about why it sucks, they start telling stories. Just like a religion, they start telling myth-making stories. This is the boogeyman that religion is. Here's this one time where religiotards did X. Here's this other time. And then you try to bring them back to the essential facts, have a reasonable conversation, which for the most part, you know, he had and we did. They're incapable of doing it. Why? Because they've got this boogeyman in their mind, religion, and it bears no relationship to reality, so it's completely anti-science in that sense. That's what I came loaded for. I had to shift gears to have this more type of a conversation. But to answer the specific question, no, totally anti-science. They do not accept evidence that goes against their conclusion. They don't search it out. Aaron Ra, I've been doing this for 20 years, and he seems to come up with no evidence, no studies that show the pro-social benefits of religion. No, and they were cited in the last debate he was in, clearly and concisely. He didn't deal with any of them. Most anti-theists are like that. Not this particular gentleman right here, civilized, decent young man.
All right, this was a great discussion, you guys. I'm curious how the video will do. Let's try something new this time. I'm going to say if you're for the affirmative position, go ahead and give the video a like. If you're for the negative position, which would be Craig's position, the Christian position, give the video a dislike. I know it might be a lot of dislikes, but I think YouTube engagement doesn't really care whether or not it's likes or dislikes. They're coming to get me.
I think it does, actually. They probably already liked the video like 500 times.
I don't think it affects it. So
right, but they already liked the video naturally like 300 times before you told them.
Are you saying
they already upvoted him a lot?
Craig's worried. Craig's worried he's going to be the loser. I'm
going to lose. Of course I'm going to lose. They got like 300 likes before you even asked the question.
This is not a scientific study.
Buck.
Craig.
Is John Buck in the audience? John, vote, John.
Those of you that are still
vote, John Buck, Stephanie, vote.
Those of you that are still here can switch your
Christianity
vote.
number one.
But once again, I'm going to be debating next week. I'm going to be debating Adam Kokesh on libertarianism. The question is, without a strong central government, would America collapse? I'm taking the affirmative position. I'll put an argument together, and we'll go ahead.
That fool,
Craig. This is my outro. This is the part where you shut up.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway. So this was a great conversation. I thank you guys for joining in. If anyone wants to be on the show, wants to debate, you can go ahead and email me. The email is on the screen. It's been on the screen the whole time. friended2157@gmail.com. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for the super chat. And we will see you guys in the next video.